Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Gord Miller. Got Ray Ferraro coming up here in a moment. A rare late July appearance for Ray. Big golfer. I'm sure he was watching the Open. Well, that's a different viewing experience when you're in BC.
Yeah, that's
right?
A 4 a.m.
It's an early start time. But the leaders would have gone out 6:45, 7 a.m. Ray's probably up anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a great tournament, great course. Like Royal Troon is just a great place to host.
So amazing. Think about it. The winning score was 9 under par. Royal Troon is 6,200 yards long. Augusta National this year was like 7,550.
Yeah, it's all about the weather. It's all about the links. It's about where you penalize players. You know, it's mid-July in Scotland, and it looks so miserable.
Well, yeah, I was
like it's pouring, it's windy, it's
cold. I covered
cold.
the Open 4 times, and 3 of them were in Scotland.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was the worst advertisement for Scottish tourism. Like, come to Scotland in mid-July, everyone's wearing toques.
It's awful.
Heavy coats. It's windy and rainy.
It just looks terrible.
Come to the Scottish coast, you'll like the food's great, too.
Right. It looks terrible. Like, my grandfather was born and raised, like, 20 minutes from that course, and he came over, and now I'm starting to figure out maybe what he was thinking. Although it's not like our winters here are exactly anything to write home about, right? Like in January, it's probably 7-8 degrees over there, maybe raining, but they're not freezing the way we would be here. But great course. I thought the first 63 holes were just incredible.
Yeah.
And then Xander Schauffele just went into machine mode.
And won it.
But also no one could keep up. He won it because he went low yesterday. He played phenomenally well.
65. It's not like somebody gagged at the finish line.
He went out and said, I'm taking this tournament, and he played as machine-like as you can. Fairways, greens, 2 putts, and I'm out. And then he hit some 7-8-foot birdie putts. He saw the edge off a couple of holes where he could have shot 62. He was that good yesterday. But Billy Horschel got one sniff of the claret jug and said, no chance. Yeah. See you later.
Scotty Scheffler couldn't putt.
Rose couldn't close. Lawrence wasn't going to do it, with all due respect. You just knew that the honeymoon phase was going to, at some point, come to an end.
You knew he was the guy you were going to see a lot in the early coverage, and then you were going to see him just walking through.
And then it was just going to be gone. And it was the same thing with, what was his name, Matthew Brown, was it?
Yeah. Mac Brown.
Or whatever his name was. The first 3 days, it was like, wow, this guy's he's going off last at the Open. You didn't see him once on Sunday because he was completely out of the tournament. And Schauffele just said, I'll take it.
And Schauffele, it's
and good for him. He's a great player, and that's 2 majors now.
2 majors this year. And this year had his dad kind of eased out as his coach. Right? So his dad was like
heavily involved in him.
Ever present, right? And
still around him all the time.
But not his coach.
Okay.
And so that's a hard one sometimes, right? Because, and the question you'd ask is, would anyone else hire your dad to be their coach?
Who asked Justin Thomas that? He's dealing with it all the time.
Right,
although Tiger's dad got him there, then Hank
Haney.
He faded and said, I'm out of here.
He handed the keys to Hank Haney pretty early on. Like Haney took him on like in 97 or 98. But like that sort of back and forth. Now in team sports, obviously you have to let someone else coach your kid.
Some parents would try to get involved still. But yes, you're right. All right, Ray Ferraro coming up here in a moment. I referenced this Bill Zito quote.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I saw this last week. I don't know how I missed it on July 1st or in and around, because it was bedlam with the Panthers winning, and then they kind of just stepped aside at the draft, and in free agency they were somewhat active, but not a ton of activity from them. And he was asked to look back on, major trades and making moves and making decisions, and whether or not, it's worth it in the end. Clearly, we know the answer because the Panthers ultimately have won. So maybe it's a bit easier for him to give this answer now. But he took some big swings in Florida. And here's what he had to say about making those changes and making tough decisions in order to achieve the ultimate goal.
I tell a story about trades where it's not always about the trade, but it's about the result. So you may have a situation where you're in the city and you have a ski chalet in the mountains, and your dream is to have your 7 best friends come for a ski weekend, and they show up, and it's awesome. It's Thursday night, you're going up to ski Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you have 4 Maseratis, two guys in each car, and you're going, and a blizzard comes. That's it. Your dream, you can't go. You can't drive in the snow. I don't know that for sure, right? They're race car Maseratis that you can't drive in the snow. And the neighbor says, I got 4 SUVs. Want to trade? Absolutely. And you lost the trade. You got killed on the trade, right? But you had your weekend. And so that's almost where we are now with regard to personnel acquisitions trades. It's like you're trying to put the puzzle together.
What a quote and what an analogy. You had your weekend.
Only Bill Zito could use a skiing analogy in Florida.
Mm-hmm. But it lands beautifully.
It does, and
that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's all the Leafs have 4 Maseratis,
and they need some.
They need an SUV.
So,
they want to get up to Collingwood for the weekend. There's your answer.
So, Tkachuk for Huberdeau was the first trade involving 200-point players since the Gretzky trade. That trade was in 1988. So think about that. How long it had been since 200-point players were traded for each other.
Right. And
in the cap era, almost impossible to do.
Sure. And again, I think you're hyper-focused on just the Tkachuk trade. He's talking about it in general as a philosophy.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was a brilliant trade. Will go down as one of the great trades in NHL history.
And signing Oliver Ekman-Larsson to fill the hole the first 2 months of the year with Aaron Ekblad and Brendan Montour both out.
Kulikov, too, coming back to Florida on the cheap.
And Ekman-Larsson was excellent for them.
Right.
He held them together for the first 2 months of the year. Right?
But, the putting the puzzle together, and I think, again, when we talk about the Leafs here, and we're talking about the Blue Jays here, there's some similarities with Bo and Vladdy. Who they are and what they represent, and there's some nostalgia, and you're connected to them, and you've got their jersey, or your kid does, and it's your favorite player, and you're like, I can't picture what it's going to look like, and it's the great unknown. But it's the great unknown. You have no idea if it's going to work, but you tried it.
Fans always want to get rid of guys.
That's not true. Well, no one wants to get rid of Austin Matthews.
No one
wants to get rid of.
No, a guy. They want to get rid of.
Sure.
In this market,
I would say the Leaf fans probably have a right more than any other fan base on earth to have a gripe with some things.
Well, so
would you disagree with that?
No, but what they do is they focus on one person. So it's been Todd Gill, Larry Murphy, Brian McCabe, Dion.
It gets carried away.
Usually a defenseman.
Snowballs.
Normally a defenseman, but it focuses on one person that they suddenly want to get rid of.
Right, but this, I think, yes, this summer it's been about one, but it's been collectively the philosophy of the core four for a long time, right? It has been. And there are 4 Maseratis. They're not willing to trade one for a truck. They have not been. They will not do it. And again, they're not going to this year. Maybe they tried and they couldn't make it work.
Now, if you wind up in a streetcar race,
Maseratis are good. Yeah. Here's Ray Ferraro. Hey, Ray, what's happening?
I'd like to see Gord get into a Maserati.
You imagine how awkward that would look?
Oh, my God. You'd need a wrench, a shovel.
A spatula.
Not
getting in, Ray. Getting out would be the trick.
Oh, impossible for that. Impossible.
Yeah.
So you guys, you're not talking. Last time we talked, Hayes, we were talking about Marner. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, you'd be shocked about the topic in the city. It still somehow resides. And we played that Bill Zito clip. I don't know. Did you see his clip around July 1st? He had an analogy about trying to, do a weekend with 7 buddies up skiing and a snowstorm hits and you got Maseratis and you had to trade a Maserati for an SUV, but you had your weekend. And the point he was making was, trades, if you look at them in an isolated, vacuum, you might say, wait a minute, you traded a Maserati for a beaten down SUV. But if the goal is to get out of town during a snowstorm, then it's a worthy trade. And, that was the point he was trying to make about, getting to the promised land. And again, it's easier for Bill to say that now because he got to the promised land, right? And he made moves and they had a good team and they won the Cup. But I think it's a perfect analogy for, what happens in this city and other cities, other teams, other collective star players, where there's just your management's like afraid to do it because they're like, I'm going to lose this, or I don't know if we're going to get to the chalet. I don't know if we'll have that ski trip anyway. So do I really want to trade the Maserati? And it was a great analogy that he used. And I think it applies to the salary cap era and making tough decisions.
Well, I think the league, my view of this is, or I've come to this maybe over time, is the salary cap has to be conducted with even less emotion than a manager should have most of the time. You can't get connected and you can't fall in love with your players You really like them. They're good people. They're good players. They get points. We're talking about the Leafs here, and you don't win. Like, at some point, it just doesn't work, right? And year after year after year, no matter what has happened individually or win around last year or get to Game 7 this year, don't win. So in some way, there has to be a cut of emotion from who you really like, who you don't really like. It doesn't even matter. The mix of the team is wrong, and it has to be changed. And I think this summer was pretty clear, like, Tanev is unlike anybody that they've ever had, is at least not ever, but in the last half dozen years. He's just completely different in what he does and what he understands and what he can do. He was a terrific signing to me. I really like it.
Yeah.
Marner is an interesting character because of the core four, the points that they've had, the lack of success that they've had, which is all kind of got to be married up together. You're also now, if they were going to do this, I guess last summer would have been the time, in my mind, to do it. That was the time. Because now you're 1 year away from $11 million off the books with Tavares. You're going to have a salary cap increase. Let's make it $4 million. So there's $15 million off the books. You can do a lot with $15 million.
Ray,
so maybe Gord, like you would know, the people you talk to, maybe the deal involved, like if they ever got to really seriously talking, maybe it was all future related. Well, who wants that?
Yeah. So Ray, you and I have talked to 1,000 executives over the years at the World Junior, at the World Championship, in NHL rinks. And I think you and I would agree that one of the hardest things for them to do, and one of the things a lot of them don't do, is be realistic about their team.
Oh, yeah.
Is to be objective. We've walked away from talking to GMs and thought, no chance.
Like always uber positive? Always optimistic about things.
This kid we drafted is going to be in our lineup next year.
Right.
And he's going to play in the power play. And our team's going to do this. And you're kind of going, and Ray and I would kind of look at each other walking out and go, oof.
And not even just by a little bit. And I understand where they get sucked into it. It's A, they've drafted or traded for these players. B, the success of the team obviously means they get to keep their jobs. And so they're looking at it under the most positive of perfect circumstance. And you leave and just kind of think they're really missing or I'm missing by miles. And because we have no emotion or like, I don't care who wins, it's pretty easy to look and go, that's going to work, that's not going to work. Right. One thing we know will not work, because we just had 7 years of it in Toronto, right? The last 7 or so, is that small, fast, and skilled does not work. Look, I wish it did, because that's what I love. But look at the teams that win and get deep through the playoffs, and they have 1 or 2 small guys. And 2 years ago, it was the Conn Smythe winner, Jonathan Marchessault. Last year, this past year, it was Evan Rodriguez.
And big defense. Defense.
Huge defense. For to walk on the ice, they're like a football team. And even if they're not the, like, Nico Mikkola is not an all-star defenseman. He's a monster. He's always in the way. Mm-hmm. Even when you think you're close to the net, all of a sudden you're 3 feet away from the net. Like, those are the guys, as we've seen, and go back even through the Tampa years. They're big. And you want to tell, what you can say, Braden Point's not small. He's one of the best players in the league. Nikita Kucherov, or it's not big. Nikita Kucherov's not big. Got 140 points this year.
But a giant defense.
Giant.
Washington had a big defense. St. Louis had a big defense.
Yeah. Montreal, when they went to the Cup final.
Colorado had a pretty big defense.
Yeah.
And they also had Cale Makar.
Right.
Who's not small. He's like 6 foot.
No, but I mean, like, it's of a smallish guy, like stars, not middle of the lineup guys. And the Leafs tried to cultivate that small and quick. And hey, everybody's got ideas. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. That didn't.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's clear. It's clear cut, man. I remember I've referenced this a bunch of times. A couple of years ago, Daryl Sutter was asked about the 70s Habs, I think it was. I think it was when Guy Lafleur passed away.
Yeah.
And everyone was, in typical Sutter fashion, everyone's like, please give us another anecdote about the greatness of Guy Lafleur. And he's like, no, I'd rather talk about their defense. Yeah. And he went on about that. He said, I remember it vividly. He's like, who were their top 4 defense? Because everyone's talking about Lafleur and up front. And naturally, they were great players. Like the 70s Habs, that was a dynasty. But he said they were all monsters. Larry Robinson was a monster. Serge Savard was a monster.
Lapointe
was a monster. He said they had a top 4 that played every single second, and they were all massive. And that's why they won every single.
And the Islanders were big on defense. And the Oilers, great teams, they were bigger than you think.
Mm-hmm. And then they mix in a Paul Coffey or whatever.
Kevin Lowe was 6'4", right? Don Jackson was 6'4". Randy Gregg, like they were. Charlie Huddy was a sturdy, solid guy. Like it is interesting, Ray, how the pendulum has swung, isn't it? Because it swung one way for a while, right?
Not necessarily the winners, though. That's the point. Like, there were teams in the league that thought, I'm going to do it differently.
I'm going to find a market inefficiency.
I'm going to find a market inefficiency. I know I can do this. And the winners every year kept saying, just come look at the parade, man. We're 6'4", 220. Come take a look.
I would say this is a real point of contention about as more and more numbers and analytics and my favorite term, play driver, get into the equation. Sometimes the numbers look great, because in a regular season you play a team somewhere that's no good. If you're in a 5-game goalless drought, you get a team coming in on 4 games and 6 nights. They're not very good. They're
backup goalie.
Man, it all works, and you're like, you score twice. Well, if you don't score in the first 3 games of the finals, you get the same team the next 4. And you got the same matchup. And now you're climbing uphill. And I think that's where I think the size gives you an opportunity, even when you don't have it. You don't have your best night, you can defend and keep yourself in the game. And the smaller, skilled player, the play driver player, to me, they have to be at the top end of your roster. And there can't be a lot of them because you just can't collectively fight through this new style defense. Because the other thing is, the new defensemen that are 6'5" and 6'3", they can skate.
Yeah.
In the past, the big guys, they were like big traffic cones. You just looked for them and tried to get around them. Now you end up in the corner with a guy that weighs 230 pounds, and not only are you out of the play, he doesn't let you get back into it.
And Ray, the other aspect of this that's interesting is the concept of patience and with young players. And again, I go back to the fact you and I did how many World Juniors together, and you see these terrific young players who dominate at that level, and you try to say to the fan base, that guy's going to need 2 or 3 years for the most part. There's exceptions, but for the most part, that guy's going to need 2 or 3 years to be an impact player in the NHL. And that's so hard to try to, I see all these Rookie of the Year predictions. Most Rookies of the Year are, Bedard's an exception, just turned 19. But, a lot of them are 21, 22 years old.
Well, obviously I follow the Canucks a little bit here. And so the draft pick, the future draft pick things, really kind of, I've started to look at them in different ways. So they made a trade. I forget which trade it was, and they traded a 2027 pick.
Yeah. The player's 14.
He's 14 years old right now. So just to get to the draft, you're looking at guys, in concept that are 14. And then unless he's a first or second rounder, you're probably looking at not 3 years, but 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's mind-boggling how difficult it is to piece together a timeline to try and make it fit, that the pieces come together or the team comes together at the right time where ages fit and experience fits. And then you might do it all right and still lose. Mm-hmm. It is, I think, guys, over, the last few years, getting to work right to the Stanley Cup final is to see how much good fortune plays into it.
Sure.
2 years ago, Florida couldn't have fielded a team for another game. And this year they were healthy as you possibly could be. They had a few, Bennett was banged up, but my goodness, they were healthy. And 2 years ago, when they lost to Vegas, they had no players. And that's good fortune.
Yeah, and that's what's scary, I think, if you're a Leaf fan, if you're a Canucks fan, they share in common. They haven't won a cup in ever. Vancouver's never won one, and the Leafs haven't won one in over 50 years. Is that now you got 32 teams and a hard salary cap.
Right.
So
and it's also and the whole thing is tilted towards helping the teams that aren't doing well. They get the earlier draft picks.
Right.
They get the revenue. It's all tilted towards them.
Good luck.
The dynasty, like what Tampa did, I think in a few years, we're going to look back maybe in 10 years and go, that was pretty amazing what they did. Because I just don't think that is going to be very easy to replicate. And if you look at it, Stamkos was the number one pick overall in the draft. They drafted extremely well. They had Hedman. Was he number 2, I guess?
He went 2, yeah.
Behind Tavares, yeah.
Yep.
And they got Vasilevsky at 18 in the first round. So aside from Braden Point late and Alex Killorn late and
Kucherov late.
Kucherov second round.
All these amazing picks later in the draft, they had cornerstone players that were at the very top of the draft.
And Florida got Ekblad first overall.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's a tough, no easy way formula to try and make it work.
Well, even that is another part of the uncertainty is the draft and things just falling in place for you. Like, forget when the puck drops and you actually play. Like, everything leading up to that, getting free agents to come here, working the trade out, having a player that's available at the right time for you to acquire, picking that guy.
And picking an 18-year-old. I mean, NFL teams are picking 22-year-old players who play college football for 4 years.
And even there, though, you can't downplay the luck that has to apply there. Like you mentioned, Tampa going to 3 straight Cup finals. You got the Kansas City Chiefs who are trying to three-peat in the NFL. It's never happened in the Super Bowl era. 9 teams passed on Patrick Mahomes. 9 teams.
Okay, Hayes, that reminds me, you know what I like about that is, so you mentioned 9 teams passed, but when, say somebody looks at, we'll say Kucherov, I think he was picked 37th, and they'll talk about the teams 1 or 2 picks in front and say, "Oh, what a miss." What about the 34 other picks in front of them?
Right, exactly.
How about teams that had 2 picks?
Exactly. Or traded out. They're like, there's no one here on our board. We don't like this board. We're moving out.
Well, the other 34 opportunities in front of them, they all found somebody that they viewed as a better prospect.
Yeah.
And the stories are
might want to review that.
Head scratchers going on, right?
Right.
Stories are legendary about teams trading out of picks and
all the time. All the time. Like, we're focused on the Leafs a lot, but there's countless examples of them being like, we'll move back, and then a guy gets taken. You're like, what are you doing, man? He's right there. You could have had him. You decided to move back. And, they're not alone. Every single team has a history of that. And there's things that break your way as well. You get a guy that you weren't even thinking twice about that turns into be a very good player. But there's just so many different pieces to the puzzle that have to break your way.
Now, Ray, I got a question for you before we go here.
Yep.
I got a question. So later on in the show, I will tell one of my favorite Ray Ferraro stories.
Oh, boy.
I'll let you pick it. The Russia cell phone story.
That's a good one.
San Jose sunglasses.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? There's more.
Yeah. Vienna Airport. Vienna Airport.
It might be a good one too. Is
St. Louis Airport.
Yes. The summation of the Paris train trip.
The Paris train trip. Yes.
We're going there for the Olympics in 4 days.
But I want you to pick which one of those. Which one is the best one to tell our audience?
I don't. Geez, Gord. Like, honestly, I think there were so many where I was so hapless. I think that is. I think the true. Okay, because I got confused here. What was the first one again? Because that one I went
Russia cell phone.
What? Russia's cell phone.
Okay, go with that one. We're locking that in.
Russia's cell phone.
Yeah.
Russia's cell phone.
Yeah.
That was.
This
when
was
you hear
Ray at his
this-
absolute greatest.
Okay.
When you hear this, and don't forget, Gord, to add in where I was on the call the next day too, like the whole thing.
There's a whole
Once it was
roundabout here.
reported.
You have all the details?
Remember that?
Uh-oh.
We were walking on the street.
Oh yeah, yes. But the call the next day, yes.
Got everything?
Got everything. Got it
Okay.
all. Yeah. This is a Ray Ferraro. This is the cycle of Ray Ferraro. This is the single, double, triple home run of Ray Ferraro.
Okay.
I want to say though, it's no accident because it seems to keep happening.
He called me this year. He was booking some flights for ESPN. He said, "Hey Gordo, when we go to do Panthers games, do we fly to the Clearwater Airport?" I'm like, "Ray, that's on the other side of the
It's in
state.
Tampa,
That's
isn't it?
near Tampa." I think you're thinking Fort Lauderdale, right? Fort Lauderdale.
Okay,
Gotcha.
I'll give you one more quick one. This was last year. Gord and I always check our schedules just to see if we, by fortune, get in the same city, we can go for dinner and all that. And so I said, "Oh yeah, I see whatever the date was, January 16th. I'll see you in Toronto for the Detroit game." He goes, "Well, you're going to be the only one there. The game's in Detroit." Like, I had no idea.
We'll go to Barbarians for dinner. Well, it's going to be a long
Is there
walk.
one in Detroit? Is there, unless it's a franchise. I don't think we'll be doing that. All right.
I do have to say I did see some good news before we came on here. Well, good
Yeah.
news for me. My first roommate and my good buddy Dean Evison gets hired in Columbus. So
Yes.
for him.
really happy for Dino.
Yeah.
That's a great. He had a good run there in Minnesota. I mean, they had a weird salary cap's weird in Minnesota.
They're
and he-
stuck, right? With the buyouts of Parisi and Suter.
Right.
One more year of that.
Yeah, but he'll
I was
right
really
the ship
happy
there.
too. In a really competitive coaching market, I was really happy to see him get the opportunity with Don Waddell. So
Awesome.
good luck to Dino.
There you go, Dean Everson going to Columbus as their new head coach. All right, Ray, let's do this again in August. We'll call you back
We'll
up.
do that. And and Gordo, I did get a question about: were you wearing at the Stampede big hat,
No.
Wrangler jeans, big
was-
belt buckle? I know you had.
Yeah, yes, I was.
Did you
Yeah.
have the plaid shirt?
Not the plaid shirt. I went with a plain shirt.
You didn't fully commit?
Well, I'm from there. Like they don't dress like that there. They,
Oh, it's only tourists that do that?
it's Ray's cowboy has a string and a whistle on it. Right? So it's-
You always find them somewhere.
That's the one.
all right,
awesome,
Ray.
guys.
Okay,
You guys
pal.
have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. There's our buddy Ray Ferraro. All right.
the
Yeah.
Russia cell phone story is one of the all-timers.
Okay, we'll get to that in the next hour.
Yeah.
We got Shane Bacon coming up. We got to get into what happened over the weekend at
Yeah.
the Open Championship. We've got NFL camps opening up. Actually, a lot of news coming out of the NFL. John Harbaugh, for some reason, going to war on critics of Lamar Jackson,
So what-
which I just can't understand.
Well, because the thing is, you're going to find critics anywhere.
Right.
Like it's almost like you're looking for a fight.
And I get it. That's your guy, but this seems totally manufactured.
Is anyone is there a widespread feeling out there that he's not very good?
Only in the playoffs, and that's legitimate critique. He's 2-4 lifetime in the playoffs. His numbers have been great. That's it. No one's questioning Lamar Jackson's greatness everywhere else.
I just find sometimes you need, and I don't want to. The Harbaughs seem to have a knack.
They motivate and they create
They look for the
narratives.
monster. They look for the monster. Under
They
the bed.
love playing the victim card.
Yeah.
And it works for them. It is very motivating in sports. Underdog, they don't believe in you. They're being critical. You watch out.
Everyone hates us.
Yeah.
Actually, no one hates you.
No one does.
You-
Everyone
like,
concedes Lamar
at Michigan,
Jackson's a great player.
Everyone hates us at Michigan. Actually, Michigan gets 110,000 fans.
Right, you're doing pretty well.
Like-
yeah, people want to go there. It's a great school, great history. The Big House is awesome. Don't worry about it. And then Jordan Love, Adam Schefter reporting that Jordan Love could end up being the highest paid player in NFL history by the end of the week.
So if we decided who is it? Trevor Lawrence right now is the highest paid. Is he 155 million?
I think it might be, but there's a combination of Lawrence, Burrow, Hurts. Then Mahomes reworks his deal every
right,
single year.
because they're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Which
So
you can't
we'll
do.
clarify that with that conversation coming up in about an hour's time. So we got a lot to get into here. Gord Miller's in here. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, we'll get to something to chew on here in just a moment. Brought to you by Boston Pizza. And Gord, we talked a little bit about the Open Championship where
Yes.
Xander Schauffele wins his second major. Incredible accomplishment. He's been a really good player for a long time. Consistently good every single time at big events. Consistently in the mix. and he won the PGA, and he wins the Open yesterday. Having a great season. So that's the primary story. Then beyond that, it's Justin Rose was in on it. Billy Horschel, Scotty Scheffler, tee to green was immaculate. He just
as always.
Putt. As always. Tee to green, he's Tiger in 2000. He's tee to green.
He's as good. I covered Tiger in 2000 when he won the U.S. Open and won the British Open. I mean, he won everything by
won the Slam, yeah.
He was unbelievable. He could be that. Like, I honestly think if he was an average, I think he had 14 birdie putts inside 10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Like to lead the tournament.
He misses all of them. His lag putting yesterday was horrendous.
He missed by a lot. Like, it's hard to believe that. It's interesting because, Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods are, considered the two greatest players of all time, rightfully so. They were two things. They were longer than everyone. They were measurably longer than everyone, than their peers.
Mm-hmm.
They're two of the greatest putters that ever lived. Tiger's probably the greatest long putter, and Nicklaus from 15 feet in.
They're so clutch.
If Scheffler was an average putter, just average,
he'd have 4 or 5 majors by now, and he would have won so many more tournaments. It's scary. Like,
it's bewildering.
He's won 2 majors, both of them at the Masters, and it feels like he's won 4 or 5. Yet he hasn't. He's in the mix all the time.
But Schauffele also, didn't I see? Hasn't he finished top? Has he been top?
He's top 10, I believe, in all 4, and then he won both.
11 straight or something.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he was final group at the Players that Scotty came back and took from him and Wyndham Clark. So he could have won the Players, these 2 majors. Anyway, just an incredible year for him.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
But I always come back to Rory McIlroy as like a side story. Like, I was texting with my dad last night just about the tournament.
Who, by the way, is awesome. I just want to say
thank you.
Shout out to your dad, who is a legendary broadcaster, but an awesome guy.
Awesome guy, big golf fan. And, we were just texting about the tournament. And, we were talking about Schauffele and how he's in on everything. And then he listed off a number of guys who are equally, quote unquote, in on everything. Koepka was in there, DeChambeau was in there, Schauffele's in there, Scheffler's in there. And he did not include McIlroy, which I pointed out. And he left me on red, actually. I don't think he ever responded to that. Which I don't know, maybe some secret, like a closet McIlroy super fan or something.
Kids do that to their parents, right?
Usually it goes the other way, but he left me on red. But the point being is, like, McIlroy, it feels like it's an eternity away from him actually winning again. Yet he missed 2 3-foot putts a month ago from winning the U.S. Open. Like, he had a 2-shot lead on the back 9.
He hasn't won a major in 10 years.
But that's the point. He hasn't won in 10 years. And now it feels more distant than ever. Yet a month ago, he had 2 3-footers to win the tournament. So, 3-footers. Not you have to, shoot a back 9 29 to win this thing. 2 3-foot putts. And I think he may have spiraled completely out of control, because this week was a disaster for McIlroy.
What did he finish?
And mentally,
what did he finish? 13 overs?
Yeah, he was right there with Tiger.
Yeah.
So I don't. Now you got to wait all the way until the Masters next year. I don't think he's going to win there. Feels like he should. The way he plays the game, he's so good, so talented.
One of the things about him is it's a bit like Greg Norman, and to a lesser extent Phil Mickelson. It's the way they lose, right? So yesterday, as you pointed out, Xander Schauffele won that golf tournament. Like, it's not like someone blew up and gave it away. He went out and won that golf tournament. But remember McIlroy, one of his first Masters in contention, put a ball into the cabins.
Yes, way left on 11, I think it was.
Like he does implode in memorable ways.
Yes.
Mickelson into the hospital.
Mickelson at the U.S. Open a million times.
At the 18th. Norman famously with the
Masters in 96, 89, or 86.
Yeah, so I think that to use the term recency bias sticks with it. You can remember how he lost.
Yes. Well, you look at the last decade, I'd argue he has been consistently the best player for the last 10 years. He's 35. Like, that's his prime, 25 to 35. Koepka could put his hand up at times. Dustin Johnson, Scheffler recently. There's a time Jason Day may have been competing. Like, there have been guys who have come and gone over that decade where you'd say that guy could put his hand up and say, actually, he was better. And maybe Koepka was, maybe DJ was, but I don't think so. Like, I think for a decade, if you just said, taking results out of it, who's the best player? You'd probably say McIlroy. He hasn't won a major. at any point in that decade.
He's won a lot of tournaments.
He's won tournaments. He's won FedEx Cup. He's won DP World Tour. He's won Ryder Cups as the face of the European team. He has not won a major, which is pretty incredible. And it feels like it's pretty distant from actually happening.
Someday, I hope someday he'll tell the story of just what happened after the U.S. Open, like what went on in the weeks afterwards, where he kind of went to New York, right? He said he walked around the streets of New York at one point because no one.
Well, he got back with his wife, who he was divorcing at one point. Yeah. They got back together. I think he did go to New York. I think she's from Rochester or something. Maybe they went back to her hometown. I don't know. But he's on vacation again. He said that after he missed the cut. He's like, around the back nine, I was thinking about where I'm going on vacation. Like mentally, he's just gone.
Well, and part of that's a defense mechanism. I remember Greg Norman saying, well, I've got a helicopter and an island.
Right. This is beneath me. I don't care enough.
Who cares about it? He cared deep.
Of course he does.
He was a great player. Greg Norman was a great player who was a very prickly personality and turned a lot of people off. But McIlroy's almost the opposite. Mm-hmm. Like, there aren't many people that don't like Rory.
So endearing, like just so easy to... Yeah, exactly. You want to hear him talk about almost anything.
He's been outspoken about, he defended the PGA Tour, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it was almost hard to watch on Thursday and Friday. It was hard to watch.
Well, it was so ugly. Some of the shots he was hitting, like he was snapping that ball all over that golf course. And Tiger, it was crazy.
And the whole Colin
Tiger's a different story.
Colin Montgomery made the comment about, he should...
Which he's entitled to his opinion.
And then Tiger fired back with I'm a former champion. I can play it. I'm 60.
Absolutely.
And
which he can. Like Tiger's entitled to play. Montgomery's entitled to his opinion. I think Montgomery's probably onto something. It's like Tiger, I don't think is just going to magically find it. He's almost 49 years old. It's not close. He never plays. It's just not going to work. Like, it's not going to happen. He's not going to reignite something. Yet he's done so much, and he can play if he wants to play. Play the Masters until he never wants to play again.
Did you see on Friday? Like, he was, I think, 18 shots off the lead at one point. Massive gallery around.
Of course, because it's ceremonial now. That was me. I went to Augusta for the first time, and I said, I have to see him. Now, he made the cut, which was great, because then he was there on the weekend. But I was going there Friday afternoon, and I was looking at the tee times. When does he go out? Turned out he was late early, so I was nervous I was going to miss him. The only thing I thought of when I got there, which speaks to him, was not, I got to walk down one, I got to see the leaderboards. I had to see Tiger.
At the Masters,
At the Masters. But even if it was Tiger at the Michelob Open, I had to see Tiger. I wanted to be able to say I saw him live because I had never seen it before.
He was, I would argue, in 2000, one of the most famous athletes in the world.
Of course.
He was, and it was at the Open that year at St. Andrews. And Tiger was always very good about waiting to putt out, because sometimes it's considered rude to mark, but he'd mark like a 1-footer because he knew that once he putted out, the entire gallery was going to the next hole. So at St. Andrews, really tight, right? And I think he was playing with Nick Price, might have been, and so he drained a long birdie putt on the 8th hole at St. Andrews, and now Price has to putt. And there are 15,000 people on the move, running down metal stairs, jostling. Like it's a Rolling Stones concert, and he's trying to make a 5-footer for par to make the cut, or whoever it was. You know what I mean? Like it was
the nature of being in and around Tiger.
It was such a different. It was just hard to imagine what a golfer was like at that time.
Shane Bacon in about 20 minutes. I want to get into a couple of other things, comparing Rory, the idea of him winning a major, to other things that may seem unlikely, likely, who knows. Gord's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, Shane Bacon coming up in about 20 minutes. Robert Turbin on the NFL camps opening up league-wide. His take on John Harbaugh's defense of Lamar Jackson, which seemingly came out of nowhere. Play that clip. We'll get into it with him. Sounds like Jordan Love could get paid a lot of money. A lot of money. All right, Gord, I have a few different things I want to throw at here.
Okay.
We just talked about McIlroy and how it feels unlikely he's going to win a major anytime soon. That could all change by next year, but you only get 4 cracks at it. This past week was the 4th and final of 2024. What is more likely to happen in your opinion? Rory will win another major at some point in his career, or the Oilers will win the Stanley Cup next season?
getting back is hard, but Florida just did it. I think it's more likely the Oilers win the Stanley Cup.
Really?
I just think because Rory just now again we just watched him crash and burn in the Open.
Meanwhile, again, a month ago, he was 2 putts away from winning. I know. He hasn't won in a decade.
Because the Oilers are one of 32 teams, and in golf, you got to beat 164 guys.
Yeah.
So.
And you get 4 cracks at it, although I guess here we're talking about 1 crack at it for the Oilers, right? It's not about will they win in the next decade. It's will they win next year.
I hope both things happen.
I think that would be great. I think I'm with you, though, on the Oilers. Like, I think this is a recency bias thing on both. Let's be fair.
It is, but I think we're sucker betting here because the better bet is for Rory to win a major.
Absolutely.
The better bet, like if you're a betting person, the more likely thing is
yes. Like the chances of the Oilers, yes, there's from an odds standpoint, they're going to be favored. They got a very good team. It's incredibly difficult to win. It's incredibly difficult to go back-to-back, even though, again, Florida did it. But that almost makes it feel like it's more difficult to see it twice in a row, right? Like just because the Panthers just did it, the Oilers are going to do it. It just felt like that was their chance. They had it. Game 7, that's your chance. How are you possibly going to get back there? Yet, Game 7 against the Panthers is probably the equivalent of the back 9 at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst #2
the only thing is,
for Rory.
Hockey's zero-sum, right? Someone has to win the series. Someone has to lose.
Yes.
In golf, it's not necessarily zero-sum.
Right. He can take himself out of it before it even starts.
Or he can. Everyone else can take themselves out of it.
Right. Yeah. Or he can play great and someone's just better than him.
Yeah.
There's a number of different variations there. There is some recency bias, though, on both fronts.
Yeah.
Like the Oilers, I think, deserve a lot of love. They're getting it's a little bit extreme, right? It's not the '85 Oilers. They're a very good team. Very good team. Let's see what happens next year. The ups and downs of every season make it all different. More likely, Rory will win a major tournament again, or the Blue Jays will make the playoffs next season.
Rory wins a major. I don't see the way out of this. After your opening monologue today,
it was it was dark.
You have soured me on any.
Not overly optimistic about where this is going.
I don't know, short of going on a free agent spending spree that would put them in the $300 million payroll range, how this gets better.
Yeah, it's an ugly scene right now. It is. They're just not a very good team. They have no farm system. It's not like kids are coming.
No. So
it's not like you're waiting for 3 or 4, infusions of youth where you're like, these guys are going to hit the ground running and they're going to catch everyone off guard. Yeah. And you're in a very difficult division. Right? Like Baltimore's a really good team, and I think they're going to be a good team for a long time.
The Yankees
are a good team.
Good.
Boston's better this year.
Yeah.
They're a playoff contending team. They will spend, although the Fenway Group's been different recently, but they're going to keep trying to improve.
But, the expanded playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, there's 3 wild card teams, but look at Houston. This was your year to get Houston, and they're back leading the division.
Yeah.
They were a disaster the first 2 months of the season.
What do you say?
McIlroy.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think either's going to happen, really. I've soured on the idea of Rory winning because...
What's he, 35, you said?
Yeah, he's 35. I saw on the Golf Channel they were talking about this, and Brandel Shamley, I think put it very well that, there was a time where it would be impossible for you to believe that, Jack Nicklaus would never win again, or Tiger would never, or whatever it is. You could use a countless. He mentioned Arnold Palmer, who I think won 4 pretty quick and then never won again. It's like if I had told you in 1960s he'd be like, that's impossible. Well, that's what happened. If I had told you after Tiger won the U.S. Open in 08, he wouldn't win again until 19, you'd say that can't happen. Like there's a chance Rory just isn't going to win again. Like it seems impossible, and it certainly did a decade ago, but now it's becoming more and more clear.
Isn't Tiger's 2019 Masters, doesn't it just stand out even more now?
Well, that's 86 and Nicklaus. That's what it is now.
That thing, when you think back on it now,
yes,
is astonishing.
Amazing that he battled back, got through, and won it. Yet, with all that said about McIlroy and how I'm not overly bullish, he's got the talent to win. He's always had the talent. It's that I just worry his headspace is now spun out of control.
You worry about that. Yeah.
It feels like the Jays making the playoffs next year, although you can make the case. They put a bullpen together. They have a top 3 in the rotation.
The bullpen gets healthier.
Bullpen gets healthy, and you add an arm or two. You bring a couple of kids up that could possibly factor in there. Maybe Tiedemann's ready, and he joins the rotation next year, and they have a really stout, 1 through 5. Health goes your way. Like, there are things that can happen. It's not like the Jays. This isn't Oakland we're talking about.
No, but they can't score. They don't score.
They don't score runs. I don't see how they're going to do that. Listen, I'm not saying that. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs.
Well, like I say, after you completely destroyed
they're in a bad place. Very bad place. Yeah. All right, let me ask a couple more here. Okay. Rory wins another major. The Kansas City Chiefs miss the playoffs this upcoming season.
Rory wins a major. More likely to happen. Kansas City's not missing the playoffs.
I don't think they are either. That division, Denver's awful. I don't think Vegas is very good. I think Chargers are turning things over. Like, I think 9 wins, 10 wins could get you in anyway. They're probably getting there.
Yeah. They got
Rory wins a major.
They got the best player.
They got Mahomes. Although, if he gets hurt,
if he got hurt,
he's an injury away from them probably finishing below 500. That's how big of an impact he has. All right, I got a couple more here. Okay. We'll get to them into the next hour, including a core 4 coming back in 25-26. All right. There's a core 4 element to it. That has to be intertwined. And something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza still to come. And a Ray Ferraro story.
A Ray Ferraro Russia cell phone story.
Okay, we have that still forthcoming. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.